The main point of this session is as follows, right? We love talking about impact. We love talking about sustainability. But at the same time, echoing the decade of action, we need real solutions, especially when it comes to energy. So, I think this session will challenge all of us attending Start Real Hong Kong Festival and our guests from 50 plus countries to really think about how can we make this world a more energy efficient place.
First of all, welcome. My name is Philipp Kristian. I look at how to make the future tangible. So I'm a trust futurist and innovation strategist, which means that ultimately my belief is that what we trust creates the kind of future we live in, because if there is any form of change, we have to trust it to even be willing to engage with it and to be willing to look into it. So adoption is, of course, a matter of trust in something new. So this new thing, however, as Kenneth rightly said, first needs to exist. And this is the family business background that I'm from. It's also what Leo is here to talk about, because I'm from a family business which has been building the solutions to things like renewable energy, to solutions in industrials and aerospace. And so I've always had respect for real solutions and tangible impact. But I also understand that somebody needs to then start using those things. And that convincing people to make that jump and make that leap, which often is also a trust leap, it's not just a technology leap, that can be difficult. And so as we talk about the global energy grid and also system and the sector at large, I think there's a lot of things that Leo and I will go into, and we'll explain why the solution that GES has developed is perfect for a decentralized grid of the future. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Leo to introduce himself and the project.
Very well said, Kenneth. Thank you very much for the introduction, Philipp. My name is Leopold Feiler from Germany. My personal background is marketing and digital transition. We consult companies on marketing issues and make the digitalization happen throughout different industries. But during the last 3 years, I was able to accompany with some partners of mine to a patented energy storage solution. And I'm going to lead you through the possibilities and challenges that come with it, and explain to you why that is such a big thing and why that is one of the key things for making energy sustainably available within the next years, within the next decades, and why it is so impactful for all of us as human beings, as Kenneth said before.
So in terms of that context, let's look at the global energy sector. We all know that an industry with lots of power and of course, no pun intended here, but lots of resources behind it is hard to change. But we've been seeing some tangible developments in the energy sector. So how do you sort of see that overall market changing with respect to maybe the situation here in Europe and globally?
The thing is, when it comes to energy, that barely anyone understands how much energy we need on a day-to-day basis, how much energy is needed, not only for us to cook, for example, our meals, but to run industries, to run fabrics, to run to start companies to work, and at the end of the day, even to run our mobile phone or to run our laptop. And there are quite some differences depending on different countries within Europe and within the world. Lately, for the last 20 years, Europe was sort of the peak, the leading edge in introducing renewable energy systems like windmills and photovoltaic, of course. But let us jump back a moment in time, so to say. So when we were talking about providing electric energy to the people, we were always based on a centralized system. So be it a nuclear plant, be it a coal plant, or be it petrol-based electricity production, it's always you have one large plant or one large hydro plant that is producing sometimes megawatts, sometimes gigawatts of electricity, and from that point you have the grid. The grid starts and dispatches the energy to the transition stations and then to the houses. So nowadays, speaking of a more decentralized system, because many people have photovoltaic plants on their roofs, many companies use their storage houses or their warehouses as a decentralized energy production and do not consume all of their power. So the grid is not a one direction only as it used to be. It has to be completely thought through in a new way than it used to be before. And there are, of course, buzzwords like smart grid, so that grid stations know in which areas at which day or time of the day is how much energy being needed and can be optimized therefore. But you would be wrong if you thought that we are already there. It is a very weak system. And I mean, everywhere in the world, the grid system, the electricity provision is very, very weak in terms of faults. So there might be blackouts based on minor complices. I mean, we even saw in New York, for example, some major blackdowns. We saw it in parts of Europe due to several reasons. That comes due to an increasing complexity of the electricity system. And therefore, energy storages that store energy in between and can release it are a absolutely crucial component of not only smart grids, but of the grid system in the future. Furthermore, speaking of centralized plants, I mean, there are many areas in the world where there are just not enough people living that it makes sense to put a plant there. I mean, take any small island, or in Asia, there are many islands that run completely on fossil fuels, mostly even on diesel generators. And that's also a point where it just makes sense to completely rethink electricity provision. Yeah.
So I guess we have three big pointers here. One is that there is a huge understanding needed for the type of power and also the continuity of that power, which is required not just for our own selves, but also for industry and industrial parks. And especially continuity there is important. There was a conversation a couple of years back, quite a big one, on uninterrupted power supply, which basically are, again, devices that bridge the gap between whatever variance you have and also potential blackouts, so that crucial industries that rely on continuous power can continue to operate even when things go wrong. The second one is looking at the grid system. In Germany, there's a funny anecdote that basically during the main football match, what tends to happen is that in the breaks, the traditionally the coal power stations basically they feed a lot more coal into the burners because people actually go and make a cup of coffee or tea during those breaks. You know, so the electricity usage spikes, which works well if you have the statistics, right? But not many countries have that predictability and the statistics behind it.
That's absolutely right. Just to jump into that, it is even due to the fact that more people, they can even deduct it to the breaks, to the break of the football game, because during the break the people will go and open their fridge to take out new beer or to take out a snack, and opening the fridge means to the fridge afterwards. To start running. And when you have like several million people watching a major Champions League or major game, then you can really see peaks in energy demand during the break of a football game, for example. But still, it is still just a minor fraction compared to when you start an industrial site to run, because then all of a sudden for 1 or 2 or 3 hours, some megawatts of electricity are needed right at one moment. So, but nevertheless, that's a great anecdote, Philipp. That's fun to share, definitely.
So there are these spikes that need to be managed, and I think that's causing a lot of challenges as well. And I think the last one is then what we've briefly touched on, I think we'll go into more detail on, is the sustainability of the grid. In Germany and Europe, we have, of course, a reputation for renewables, but that's also only part of the conversation because coal power plants are still being put on the grid, and there is also a different strategy for each country, as it is in ASEAN, as it is everywhere else in the world. So as we see even, political climates becoming a little bit more populist and a little bit more nationalist, it's very well possible that people will try and domesticate some of their energy production, and it's possible that some of these solutions will be short-term, aka fossil fuel based, and that's a problem. So we are now looking at alternatives both for the overall developments, which might favor a less renewable form of energy grid than we would all desire, but also by geographical constraints which we need to consider, such as, you know, the Maldives, for example, where each island that even has energy will have a diesel generator, simply because it's not rentable for you to put anything else there. And I think this is where pressurized storage is both environmentally and logistically a really good solution, and it may well now pay off. Leo, for you to talk a little bit about how that works, because I'm not sure everybody really understands how this energy storage system works and at what order of magnitude and scale it operates.
Absolutely, Philip, you're absolutely right. I'm going to jump right into that topic. Just to sum up, you said a minute ago very interesting facts. Even though we are living in a world of globalization, speaking of energy, we will see a future on localized business, on decentralization. So funny enough, it's quite the opposite where this industry has to be heading, because it makes no sense to transport energy thousands of miles from the production plant to the end consumer. It is more flexible, more sustainable, and much more efficient in terms of environmental impact and in terms of cost value ratio, so to say, to build small grid scale solutions.
Right.
And that's why I was invited, and I thank again very much to Kenneth, that I get the possibility to talk about GES, our Global Energy Storage System, today here. As Philip mentioned before, our system is based on compressed air. It's an adiabatic compressed air power storage solution. And to lead you a little bit through the possibilities that bring that with you, I would like to jump into a slide to give you a more visualized overview of that. Let's see if that works. So basically, you should see that running right now. Philip, is that right? It should work. I rely on the techniques.
Yep, looks fine.
So basically, you see on the upper left, energy, the problem, the issue with renewable energies, and be it wind or be it photovoltaic, is that they are intermittent. So that means that you have very windy days or very windy hours during the day, and you have sunny times during the day, and not so sunny times where not so much electricity is being produced. But as we all know, we consume energy, electricity, most of the time at night, because, for example, the air conditioner is running, we come back from work, we want to cook, we want to load up our electric vehicle, for example, getting more and more popular, will be a task in the future. And or even want to run our heat generators during the night if you're at a cold space. So speaking of that, there is times during the day where more energy that is being consumed is produced, and we store this excess energy. The same with the photovoltaic plant. During the day, more energy, on a sunny day, more energy than being needed is produced. At the night, naturally, you won't have any electricity harvested from photovoltaic plants. So we use the excess energy to run a compressor. This compressor compresses air, and due to a basic physical aspect, when you compress air, heat occurs. You not only get the pressure, you also get the heat. And our patented solution sees to store that heat in a specialized Moore chamber, a heat accumulator, and store the compressed air at a different site, so to say. So we have a two-pillar based storage solution. And later on, For example, at night or when there is a high energy peak demand, we let the compressed air release run through a part of the heat accumulator, and it runs a turbine. So basically, it's a very, very simple, almost a low-tech solution. But the problem, it was not even, or it is not even a new solution, but the issue with it was that the power-to-power efficiency rate used to be not optimal. So it was not efficient in the past. But our founder, co-founder, and inventor of this technology, a doctor of physics, he found a solution on how to tweak these physical processes to come up with a staggering 75 to 80% power-to-power efficiency rate. And if we have the right site, for example, next to a cooling facility or next to let it be a brewery or a large cooling warehouse, we can even use the heat or generate the cool and come up to 95% overall efficiency ratio. This is pretty unique within the energy storage sector, especially when you consider the pros and cons of other large scale, and we're talking only large scale here, so we're not talking about small scale batteries in your garage. We're talking about megawatt and multi-megawatt energy storage solutions here, but I come to that later on. The downside of other solutions, for example, with the batteries as the lithium-ion batteries, that you have not only during the production cycle, you have to use rare soil, rare earth, like cobalt or lithium, silice, and things like that do really harm to the earth. So basically the benefit that you would achieve by storing renewable energy is melted away by the fact that you use rare earth already during the mining process, because you need so much water and so much energy to produce those batteries in that large scale factor. And I mean, I don't want to name things, and I still think it's a good idea, but lithium-ion based battery storage is the biggest thing right now. So I think that's almost a hyper crisis.
This is a very good point you mentioned there, because I had two questions on my mind.
Yeah.
The first one is indeed that my definition of innovation in energy has always been that I take existing resources and I basically often these resources are wasted, and I basically use these resources in a new form, right? This is nothing different than if you have a ride-sharing app where you can basically, you go from A to B and you have a space empty in your car and you basically provide that to someone via a sharing economy platform. So to me, the idea and this principle of using resources that are already available, equally when somebody has a dance studio and then a yoga teacher can teach there as well because the dance studio is empty during certain times of the day. All of these are ways of increasing the resource efficiency that we have in place, which is one way of saving a lot of money and making things better without requiring more. In fact, often requiring less issues.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
So that's kind of where we are seeing this bridging effect, right? Where you have an existing grid system, which may be inefficient to a certain extent, and then this pressurized air, almost like intermediary, takes the energy and absorbs it when it's not needed, and then provides it when it is needed. And there's, I guess, then this is the question of where it would fit into a fixed system. But now you mentioned lithium-ion batteries, and of course there is some controversy around the battery packs in electric vehicles as well. So maybe let's talk in a second point about mobility. There's two things there that come to mind. One is, could we potentially in future see a vehicle where a pressurized air system could replace a battery, or even enhance a battery? And the second question would be, can I sort of fill up these pressurized containers with air and then send them to a remote place where they can then provide storage for some days or weeks? Is that possible?
Philip, that's a wonderful question. Thank you that you come up with these points. I try to figure them out point by point. First of all, Fun fact, there are already systems, vehicles running on compressed air, mainly, mainly in mining areas where combustion engines would not be would not have the wanted effect. So many of the lorries in several mines around the world run with compressed air. But that's just a fun fact on the side. The much more interesting topic that you mentioned right now is the mobility possibility of that energy storage. For example, one of our ideas is that we take advantage of ships that float around the ocean and have a garbage burning plant on them. So they collect trash from the sea, burn it, of course, filter it. While they are driving through these large garbage fields, and we use that energy that is created based on cleaning the ocean to fill up the energy storage in our containers. Because what we maybe didn't mention before very well, our system is based on our system is possible mobile in a storage container based like a traditional sea container, and in that size it can carry up to 2 megawatt hours of storage. But it is also available as a stationary plant, and we can go up to 1 gigawatt hour of storage. So that's
so Leo, maybe explain that in terms that people can sort of tangibilize, visualize. So how much would like 2 megawatt hours or a gigawatt hour give you in terms of capability to operate?
I can talk about that, but maybe I'm even having the right slide there for. Well, that's the wrong, but maybe you can see it here also. So basically on the left side you see the serial product, so to say. That's the storage container, and on the right side you see the individual plants possibility, so to say. Speaking of a container, we when we are fully loaded, so to say, we can run with one container a small village or a traditional village consistent of several houses for around about 1 week, totally autonomous on the energy, on the electricity produced based on the energy being stored in there. Speaking of larger plants that go up to 500 megawatt hours or gigawatt hour, we can run basically a whole town, depending on the town, or a whole part of the town for days at least, or we can run a industrial site for quite a while. And just to give you an idea of the size and that it already exists, you should see now the slide with our prototype. The prototype is a running proof of concept model. You see the pressurized steel tanks on the right side. They are based on traditional pipeline steel, so all existing materials. You see parts of the heat storage above it. You see how it is being transported and how it can be placed anywhere. Now, coming back to your idea, Philip, the thing is that we can harvest, so to say, energy wherever it is being produced. It can be an offsite, windmill facility. It can be an offsite ship that is producing energy on the sea, and we can ship it anywhere. For example, when there is a huge demand for energy because some sort of catastrophe happened in Haiti, for example, which comes first to my mind, where loads of energy were being needed. We don't need to ship diesel generators there and ship the generators there and ship the diesel there. We can simply put our containers there in the future, and they will even be able to run on renewable energies. So the possibilities are more or less endless. I mentioned the island resorts in the ASEAN area that I'm aware of that use diesel generators to run all of their hotels or all of their islands. That's so wrong on so many points. I mean, of course it works for sure. Many things work, but it doesn't make no sense actually. So we're here to disrupt this market. We're speaking with many partners in the Asian and within the Xi'an region, and I would be more than happy to come into contact with anyone who is interested either in the technology itself to get more insights, to get more background, or who sees a possibility to partner up, or who is even willing to invest to provide this solution to the RC market, because we're speaking to a mainly based Hong Kong base right now, right?
So I think this is it's great because these problems are everywhere in the world. So whether you're in Hong Kong or in Haiti or
Absolutely
anywhere else, there's always an issue. In certain cities, there's an issue with space. In other areas, there's an issue, of course, with pollution as well.
Right.
The problem with diesel generators is that they're generally, as we've seen, and I think as Germans we have a particular relationship with that, diesels can be quite dirty. The same goes for coal power plants. That's an unfortunate fact. This is it doesn't matter where your car comes from or where that power plant is from. Even the best still have a significant environmental impact, which is not very 2020 in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And it will not be 2030 and hopefully not 2040.
Exactly.
We need that change now. I mean, we don't want the climate change. We want the change of behavior in all the people's minds in the industrial side. And let's make that happen. I mean, it's up to us where we head with our future.
Which I think is so that there's a clear cost factor having the ability to develop this at a relatively low cost and being able to store energy with low loss and at low cost overall makes it very attractive and gives the opportunity as well for and maybe in certain case energy arbitrage. So it could even become part of an operating cost reduction model for commercial operators where they might actually benefit from that ability to release energy at different times when it's more needed. So there are many ways to spin this, but the most important thing is, first of all, in terms of the engineering, it's a solution that hasn't been achieved yet before, which I think is what I took away from your slides. What I really liked is that we're talking about a crucial point in energy storage, which, as people talk about a decentralized grid, they might forget that there's still the transmission and the storage, the intermittent storage issue, which is like thinking about an electric vehicle as one with an electric motor and getting excited about it and forgetting that it still needs the batteries, right? Because the battery is not where the power comes from, right? You either have a power source like a fuel cell and then you have your electric vehicle, or you have an intermittent power source. And in this case, with batteries, it's one which is causing a huge amount of pollution and issues. So this brings us to, I think, another point to think about. And when you speak about rare earth and even fossil fuels, there's always a reliance and a balance of power that implies, because these raw materials are usually controlled. And that also means, for the world overall, I think that there's a benefit to the ability of being even decentralized in our reliance and dependence on input materials. Air happens to be available in most places. Perhaps not necessarily on the moon as much as we'd like to, but in other places on Earth, it's usually there. Yeah. So the point is, I think a lot of the energy future has to do also with using technology to actually resort back to simpler, more natural solutions where we're able to use more effectively what's already around us, with also a lot less negative impact on the cities and settlements that are around it. And I think that's generally something which is needed. Now, one question I have, Leo, I know you're not the doctor of physics, but I imagine that the temperature, the outside temperature, would have some effect on this. So how stable are these kind of air storage containers?
You are absolutely right. There is a certain effect, but we tested it from -Celsius degrees up to 35 degrees Celsius plus, and it works just fine. Of course, it has some effect on the duration of the storage efficiency. Speaking of the efficiency, that is right. But overall, we're still speaking of plus 70% power to power, only power to power. Efficiency. So we're absolutely competitive with lithium-ion batteries. And I'm not a fan of whataboutism, but speaking of battery storage, I mean, take your mobile phone and use it in the heat, and you will see that the efficiency of that accu or energy storage is being affected by large heat in the same way. So of course there is fluctuancy based on the environment, but we're still speaking on a very little impact, on a very high.
I think it's interesting you say that, because a lot of electric vehicles have caught fire, and somehow everybody's been, for some reason or another, pushing that under the carpet, because there's a problem in the world with equating sustainability with one particular solution, which is always what seems to happen.
I'm a huge fan of electric vehicles, and I'm a huge fan of batteries, because batteries, for us as digital natives, as nomads, so to say, we rely on mobile available energy, electricity. So I'm a big fan of that, and I'm not saying, or I just want to raise awareness that there is not one single solution that fits to any problem. And our solution is a perfect, impactful, resource, non-resource harming, great solution for storing large-scale energy in a wonderful way. So.
But I think you're right in the sense that the technology, whilst it matters at the individual solution level, it's also just one way of addressing the problem. And it seems that in popular culture, we always equate one solution as the only solution that becomes a sort of token solution. So whereas I do believe that an emission-free center of town is a great idea, I think there are many more solutions to achieve that than necessarily a car with an electric motor and a battery. There must be other ways of achieving that, and we've talked about propulsion systems a little bit, but the point here is that the more we diversify energy grids, both storage in a decentralized way, provision in a decentralized way, and also the ability to have safe and compact ways of having energy wherever you need it, then we have more opportunity to diversify the solutions for how we achieve energy and mobility and society-related issues and challenges, and how do we then build a better humanity going forward, which is ultimately what these tangible solutions help us do. So I think it's really nice to then see how you're building part of that, and how this part could potentially be a second leg to stand on for what's currently relying on mostly batteries, and potentially even give us an opportunity in many areas to solve problems that for batteries are maybe too expensive to solve.
Philip, I think you are so deep into that topic. I think you're even more an energy expert by now than I am. It's really a great pleasure to have been talking to you here virtually for the Hong Kong Startup Summit. That's really fun thing. Thank you for having thought through our system so much up front. That really makes fun to talk to you.
And thanks Leo for explaining this in detail, and also I hope everybody now has a good idea of how the future of energy could look like with some of these solutions coming on the grid, and many more that we will hopefully see in the next couple of years. So with that, I'll conclude this session, and thanks for watching this.
Thank you very much. Have a great time.